At the age of 24, he commanded an army. At 30, he ruled France. At 44, he died alone on a prison island, so far from everything he had built that it took 6 weeks for the news to reach Europe. 600,000 men followed him into Russia. 500,000 never came back. And here is the thing that nobody talks about. He knew it was a mistake before he went. This is not a story about military genius. It is not a story about bad luck or bad weather or the Russian winter. This is a story about a pattern inside the human mind. A pattern that destroyed the most powerful man on Earth, and that you are probably repeating right now without realizing it. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you will see Napoleon Bonaparte completely differently. And you will see yourself differently too. Napoleone di Bonaparte was born in 1769 on the island of Corsica, a place that had been French for exactly 1 year when he arrived. His family was minor nobility, which meant they had a name, but very little money. He was not French by culture. He was not French by language. For the first years of his life, he spoke Corsican Italian, and the French children at the military school he attended in Brienne mocked him for his accent, his poverty, and his foreign name. He was small, he was poor, he was an outsider, and he was consumed from the very beginning by a hunger that had no name and no limit. He read everything: military history, philosophy, mathematics, geography. While other boys played, Napoleon studied. While they slept, he planned. His fellow students remembered him as solitary, intense, and almost frightening in his focus. At 16, he graduated from the elite military academy in Paris, 1 year early. The French Revolution found him at exactly the right moment. The old aristocratic officer class had fled or been guillotined. Suddenly, there were positions of command available to men of talent, regardless of birth. Napoleon recognized this opening with complete clarity and walked straight through it. At 24, he was given command of the French army of Italy, a starving, demoralized force that had not won a battle in years. Within weeks, he had reorganized it. Within months, he had won 6 consecutive battles. He moved faster than any general his opponents had ever faced. He fed his army off the land it conquered. He inspired loyalty so intense that men wept when he addressed them. In 2 years, he had turned a disaster into a triumph and made himself the most famous soldier in Europe. But here is what nobody understood at the time, including Napoleon himself. The hunger that drove him was not ambition in the ordinary sense. It was something deeper and more dangerous. It was a need, not just to win, but to keep winning. Not just to be powerful, but to be the most powerful. Not just to be respected, but to be irreplaceable. That need would build an empire, and it would destroy one. By 1799, France was exhausted. 10 years of revolution had produced extraordinary ideals and extraordinary violence in roughly equal measure. The government was corrupt, the economy was broken, and the country needed someone to believe in. Napoleon provided himself. In November 1799, he seized power in a coup that lasted a single day. There was almost no resistance. The people of France were not horrified. They were relieved. Here was a man who could actually run things. Here was order after chaos. He moved with terrifying efficiency. Within years, he had reorganized French law into the Napoleonic Code, a legal framework so elegant and rational that it still forms the basis of law in over 50 countries today. He reformed the education system. He rebuilt the infrastructure. He created the Bank of France. He negotiated peace with the Catholic Church after a decade of violent conflict. He was, by any measure, one of the greatest administrators in human history. And yet he could not stop. In 1804, he crowned himself Emperor of the French in Notre Dame Cathedral. He took the crown from the Pope's hands and placed it on his own head, a gesture so deliberate that every person in that cathedral understood exactly what it meant. No authority above me. No one who can give this to me or take it away. I take it myself. The hunger had a new shape now. It was no longer enough to be the most powerful man in France. He needed to be the most powerful man in Europe. And Europe needed to understand what that meant. He fought and won at Austerlitz, perhaps the most brilliant military victory in history. A battle so perfectly executed that military academies still study it 200 years later. He defeated Prussia in days. He humiliated Russia. He placed his brothers on the thrones of Holland, Naples, and Spain. At the height of his power, Napoleon controlled, directly or through allies, most of continental Europe. From the Atlantic to the borders of Russia, from the Baltic to the Mediterranean. No single person had held this much power over the Western world since the Roman emperors. And it was not enough. It was never enough. Because the hunger that had driven him from Corsica to Paris, to the throne of Europe, was not satisfied by success. It was fed by it. Every victory made the next victory necessary. Every conquest created a new border that needed defending, a new enemy that needed defeating, a new threat that needed eliminating. The empire was not built on ambition. It was built on compulsion. And compulsion, unlike ambition, does not know when to stop. In June 1812, Napoleon led the largest army ever assembled in European history across the Russian border. 600,000 men, cavalry, infantry, artillery, supply trains stretching back for miles. The Grande Armée, the greatest military machine the world had seen. His advisors warned him. His marshals warned him. His own intelligence reports warned him. Russia was vast. The summer would end. Supply lines would stretch beyond any ability to maintain them. The Russians would retreat, drawing him deeper in, burning everything behind them. Napoleon knew all of this. He was not an unintelligent man. He had read military history. He knew what happened to armies that marched into Russia. He went anyway. Why? Because Tsar Alexander had begun trading with Britain in violation of Napoleon's continental system, his plan to strangle the British economy. This was a political and economic problem. It required a diplomatic solution, or at most, a limited military demonstration. Instead, Napoleon mobilized the largest army in European history. The scale of the response was not proportional to the problem. It was proportional to the need to be obeyed absolutely, to be unchallenged, to be the single point of power in a world that needed to organize itself around him. The campaign was a catastrophe of almost incomprehensible scale. Moscow was reached. Moscow was occupied. Moscow burned. The Russians set fire to their own city rather than let him have it. Napoleon sat in the Kremlin for 5 weeks, waiting for Tsar Alexander to come and negotiate. Alexander did not come. Napoleon had no plan for this. He had never seriously considered that his enemies might simply refuse to engage with him on his terms. He turned his army around and began the long march home. The Russian winter arrived. Temperatures dropped to -30. Men froze in their uniforms. Horses died. Supply wagons collapsed. The army that had entered Russia as the most powerful military force in the world stumbled out of it as a broken, frost-bitten remnant. Of the 600,000 men who had crossed into Russia, fewer than 100,000 returned in any condition to fight. In a single campaign, Napoleon had destroyed his own army. But here is what is important to understand. The military disaster was not the cause of his downfall. It was the symptom. The cause was the pattern that had been running in his mind since Corsica. The compulsion to expand, to dominate, to be unchallenged. The inability to accept limits. The refusal to hear the word no from advisors, from reality, from the physical world. He had won so many times by ignoring conventional wisdom, by pushing further than anyone thought possible, by treating limitations as problems to be overcome rather than facts to be respected. And then he met a limitation that could not be overcome. The Russian winter. Russian space. Russian willingness to burn their own country rather than give him a clean victory. And he had no response, because his entire identity had been built on the belief that limitations were for other people. The aftermath of Russia was swift. Prussia, Austria, and Britain formed a coalition. The battles that followed were fought by Napoleon with his characteristic brilliance, but against armies that had learned from him, that had studied his tactics and developed counters. In April 1814, after a series of devastating defeats, Napoleon abdicated. He was exiled to the island of Elba, a small island off the coast of Tuscany. He was given sovereignty over it. He was given a pension. He was given 600 soldiers. He was 44 years old. Most men at this point would have accepted the reality of their situation. They had risen to extraordinary heights. They had shaped the world. They had lost. They would now live out their remaining decades in comfortable exile, writing their memoirs, perhaps. Napoleon escaped from Elba after 10 months. He landed in France with his 600 soldiers and marched toward Paris. Along the way, the troops sent to stop him joined him instead. By the time he reached Paris, he had an army again. For 100 days, he ruled France again. At Waterloo, on June 18, 1815, he met the armies of Britain and Prussia. The battle was close. There were moments when it could have gone differently. But Napoleon was not the commander he had been. He was ill. He was hesitant in ways he had never been before. The instinct that had made him unbeatable seemed, at critical moments, to fail him. He lost. This time, the exile was designed to be permanent. St. Helena, a volcanic island in the South Atlantic, more than 1,000 miles from the nearest continent, chosen specifically because it was impossible to escape from. He spent the last 6 years of his life there. He dictated his memoirs. He rewrote history, presenting himself as the defender of revolutionary principles, the liberator of Europe, the victim of British jealousy and aristocratic conspiracy. He constructed, in the final chapter of his life, a legend that would outlast everything. He died on May 5th, 1821. He was 51 years old. The official cause of death was stomach cancer. Some historians believe it was arsenic poisoning from the green dye in the wallpaper of his damp island rooms, slowly releasing toxic vapor over years. The last great conqueror in Western history may have been killed by his wallpaper. So what do we actually learn from Napoleon Bonaparte? The easy version of this story is heroic. A small boy from nowhere who reshaped civilization through sheer force of will. And there is real truth in that version. But the harder, more honest lesson is about the pattern that ran underneath everything. Napoleon was not destroyed by his enemies. He was not destroyed by the Russian winter or the British Navy or the coalition of European powers. He was destroyed by this compulsion that had built him. The same psychological engine that drove him from poverty in Corsica to the throne of Europe could not be turned off when it needed to be. It didn't have a stop button. It didn't recognize the concept of enough. Every successful person carries some version of this engine. The hunger that drives you to work harder, to go further, to refuse to accept limitations. This is the same force that, unchecked, becomes a compulsion that ignores reality. Napoleon's tragedy was not that he wanted too much. His tragedy was that he could not tell the difference between the hunger that built him and the compulsion that destroyed him. In your financial life, this pattern appears constantly. The entrepreneur who built a successful business and then expanded too fast, ignoring every warning sign because stopping felt like failure. The investor who kept doubling down on a losing position because admitting the loss felt impossible. The executive who held on to power long after effectiveness had passed because identity and role had become inseparable. The question Napoleon never learned to ask was this: is this decision coming from strategy, or is it coming from the part of me that simply cannot stop? Strategy can evaluate risk. Strategy can accept limits. Strategy can say, this is enough, this is good, I will hold what I have. Compulsion cannot do any of those things. Napoleon could have stopped after Austerlitz. He had more power, more security, more territory than any French leader in history. He could have consolidated, made peace, built lasting institutions. He couldn't stop. And the inability to stop cost him everything: the empire, the army, the freedom, and finally, the island where he died alone. Far from everyone who had ever believed in him, Napoleon Bonaparte died on a volcanic island in the South Atlantic, alone at 51, dictating myths about himself to whoever would listen. He had been the most powerful man on earth. He had held the fate of nations in his hands. He had rewritten laws and borders, and the very idea of what a single human being could accomplish. And in the end, the only thing left was the story he told about himself, because the reality was too painful to inhabit. Here is what I want you to take from this. The hunger that drives you is real, and it is valuable. Do not be afraid of it. Do not try to eliminate it. Ambition, properly directed, is one of the most powerful forces for good in a human life. But learn to hear the difference between the hunger that builds you and the compulsion that consumes you. The hunger says, I want to grow, to build, to create. The compulsion says, I cannot stop. I cannot rest. I cannot accept that this is enough. Napoleon never learned to hear that difference. The distance between those two voices is the distance between Austerlitz and St. Helena. If this story made you see ambition differently, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Next week, we go inside the mind of a man who had more money than almost anyone in history, and used it to build a prison around himself. Howard Hughes. See you then. Wealth and Wisdom Archive.